You know, every city skyline tells a story. But what if I told you the most important parts of that story, the rules that dictate every single angle, every shadow, every soaring tower are completely invisible?
So, let's start with a perfect example. Picture this. It's New York, 1977. The Citicorp Center opens, and it's an instant icon. I mean, a 59-story skyscraper that looks like it's floating on 4 massive stilts. It was just unlike anything the city had ever seen.
But just 1 year later, a terrifying secret came out. This architectural marvel was dangerously unstable. So unstable that a single big storm could send it crashing down into the heart of Manhattan.
So what happened? Well, the building's unique design was both its genius and its downfall. See, the tower had to be built on stilts to make room for St. Peter's Church, which already owned the corner of the lot. That meant the stilts couldn't be on the corners like you'd normally do. The engineer, William Le Messier, came up with this brilliant solution, a system of massive V-shaped braces, or chevrons, to transfer all that weight to stilts placed in the middle of each side. It was an elegant design for sure, but it created a hidden vulnerability.
The whole thing started to unravel because of a phone call from an architectural student, of all people, who questioned the design. This got Le Messier to double-check his math, and that's when he made a pretty shocking discovery. He called his office to ask about the joints, which he'd designed to be welded together for maximum strength, and the answer he got back must have sent a chill down his spine. They'd used bolts instead.
This was the first critical flaw. To save some money and time, the contractor had swapped Le Messier's super-strong welded joints for weaker, bolted ones. And while his firm had technically approved the change, he wasn't directly aware of it. Now, this decision alone weakened the whole structure, but the real danger came from a second, much more subtle mistake.
Okay, so here's the heart of the problem. New York City's building code only required engineers to test for perpendicular winds. That's wind hitting the flat face of a building, straight on. Le Messier's calculations followed the code perfectly, but what nobody had fully calculated was the stress from a quartering wind, a diagonal wind that strikes the building's corners. This specific angle put an enormous, unforeseen strain on those new, weaker bolted joints.
So you take these two flaws and put them together, you get a staggering 160% increase in stress on the building's weakest points. That meant a storm the city should have easily handled could suddenly become a catastrophic event.
This discovery kicked off one of the most audacious and secret engineering rescues in modern history. It was a high-stakes, clandestine race to save the Citicorp Tower.
And the situation was absolutely dire. Le Messier calculated that a 70-mile-per-hour wind hitting those corners could bring the whole thing down. And if the building's power went out, which would disable the device that helped stabilize it, there was a terrifying 1 in 16 chance of that happening any given year. Behind the scenes, the city was drafting emergency evacuation plans for 10 whole city blocks, all while keeping the public completely in the dark.
The repair plan was basically a covert operation. A team of welders was secretly brought in with a single mission: work only at night, welding 2-inch thick steel plates over all 200 of those weak, bolted joints. To the public and to the press, who just so happened to be on strike, the official story was just routine maintenance. The real goal was to get it all done before hurricane season really kicked into gear. And then, of course, the nightmare scenario happened. With the repairs only half finished, a powerful storm, Hurricane Ella, formed in the Atlantic and started heading directly for New York City. The city was literally hours away from a potential mass evacuation, with a critically vulnerable skyscraper sitting right in the storm's path.
Luckily, at the last minute, Hurricane Ella veered out to sea and the repairs were completed. The crisis was over. But the whole story of the Citicorp Center, it brings up a much bigger question. When you look at the older New York skyline, the one from the 1920s and 30s, you see this: dozens and dozens of buildings with this really distinctive wedding cake shape, where they step back as they rise.
It's a beautiful, iconic look for sure, but why did they all look like that? Was it just a style, or was there another one of those unseen rules at play?
Well, the answer lies in New York's first great rule book for buildings, a set of laws that was shaped by a very simple, very human fear: the fear of the dark. It was called the 1916 Zoning Resolution, and it was America's first ever citywide zoning code. Before this law, developers could just build these massive towers straight up from their lot lines, and they were plunging the streets below into these permanent, dark, cavernous shadows. New Yorkers were genuinely afraid their city was going to become a sunless maze, and this law was designed to stop that from happening.
The way the law worked was actually pretty clever. It didn't set a height limit.
Instead, it created an invisible zoning envelope. A building could rise straight up to a certain height, but then it had to step back from the street to keep going up. This one simple rule directly forced architects to create that famous Art Deco setback style, not for fashion, but to let light and air get down to the street.
But, cities and what they need are always changing. And by the middle of the century, a whole new architectural style and a new set of priorities would lead to the next great evolution of the skyline.
The 1961 zoning resolution was a huge shift in thinking. It replaced that simple setback rule with something called floor area ratio, or FAR, which basically controls a building's total size. But it also offered this brilliant trade-off. Developers could build even taller if, and it's a big if they created open public plazas at the base of their buildings.
A key inspiration for that law was Lever House, which was finished in 1952. Instead of filling its whole lot, it rose up as this sleek glass tower from an open public courtyard. It showed the city a new possibility, that a skyscraper could be dense up high, but generous and open on the street. It became the model for the entire 1961 law.
And the results of these two different rule books are just stark. The 1916 law gave us the masonry wedding cake, shaped by the need for light. The 1961 law gave us the glass box on a plaza, shaped by the incentive for public space. Two completely different skylines born from two completely different sets of unseen rules.
All of this really brings us to the city's hidden blueprint, a story that's constantly being rewritten in steel and glass and, of course, in law.
Because when you look at a city, you're not just looking at a collection of buildings. You're seeing the physical result of decades of arguments, of compromises, and of ideas about how we should all live together. The story of our cities isn't just about what gets built, it's really about the rules we create to shape our shared spaces.
And this evolution is still happening. In 1916, the rule was all about light and air. In 1961, it shifted to creating public space. And in 2024, New York passed the City of Yes law, updating the rules again to address the modern crisis of housing by allowing for more density. Each rule just reflects the priorities of its time. So, from a secret flaw that nearly toppled a skyscraper to a century of laws that shaped a skyline, the rules that define our world are so often hidden in plain sight. It really makes you wonder, as our needs continue to change, what will the next unseen rule be? And what kind of city is it going to build?